And just like that,
Here we are.
fall is over.
Yeah.
At least here.
Yeah. It snowed on Halloween.
No.
Or the day before Halloween.
Snowed the day before.
Yeah. And there was still snow on the ground
Yeah.
until today.
I don't know if that ever happened to us as kids. I don't recall it.
No. I mean, once as an adult, like when I was in my 20s, we had snow on Halloween.
You did.
But I don't remember it as a kid ever happening.
No. Whatever. I mean, I'd be lying if I said Thursday when I was driving home from work, I wasn't all about Christmas stuff.
Oh, yeah. You tried to put on a Christmas Sesame Street special tonight. I'm just not ready. And you're like ripping down all the Halloween decorations at 7 o'clock
Well,
this
I would have
morning.
done that regardless.
I know, but you were really anxious.
Look, 2020 has been just the worst. And you and I have these embargoes that we put into place. Specifically, if you're a longtime listener of the show, you know that pumpkin spice, you're not allowed to consume that in our household until September 1st, because it's a Burr month. My rule of thumb is Black Friday is when the Christmas stuff starts.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I said, look, 2020 is so terrible, and you obviously are feeling the heat, working from home and being stuck in the muck of it, that if you want to get a little Christmas cheer early, that's fine, but it has to be November 1st on. And
Yeah,
you said yes.
Yeah, if I feel the itch. But I just think it's funny because you're just using
This doesn't have to be an agreed upon thing.
I know, but you're pushing for it, and I'm not ready. I like our
I told you November
harvest.
1st is okay.
It's
and then
okay,
I tried to do it, and you said no.
I thought you meant it's okay for me if I feel the itch.
The embargo has been lifted.
Okay, so you just gave it to yourself. You just gave yourself
I gave
permission.
it to both of us.
Right.
It was a couple's gift. It was a family gift.
Okay.
Welcome to While She's Napping. I am Adam.
And I'm Cindy.
So last week we talked about Halloween, speaking of, and look, reflecting back on that, and I know 2020 isn't necessarily the best year when it comes to Halloween, and you know, it's outside of the norm,
right?
And it just sort of brought me back to when I was a kid and when I hit the microphone, when I enjoyed these things, and I don't know. That was a very nostalgic episode. And given the fact that we've been talking about election issues, or rather issues centered around the presidential election, that was a nice little breather.
It was. Yeah. And I loved seeing all of the costumes and memories that people posted.
Oh, we got a lot more.
We got a lot. Yeah. And yeah, it definitely made me more excited because I feel like I've kind of made this shift into, I hate to sound so pessimistic, but it's just the reality that I'm like afraid to look forward to anything.
Right.
I'm just assuming like everything is canceled and nothing is going to be the way that we want it to be. And I just am trying to accept it and make the best of it.
Right.
So doing that episode and getting all that feedback kind of inspired me to try to just make the best of this Halloween. And we did have a good day. It was fun despite all of the, not being able to do things traditionally.
Yeah, we put out a table.
Yeah.
And
with spaced apart candy.
I'm sure people took more than the required, or rather than the requested.
Well, it lasted until, we decided we didn't really want to keep giving out candy too far past dark because that was kind of within the guidelines.
The rules.
Yeah. They kind of wanted to keep trick-or-treating to a daytime activity. I think it's just easier for people to, kind of follow the guidelines and not let their guard down as much. So we tried to stick within that, but so I ran out of candy like right around the time that I would have wanted to call it a night anyway. So it was good.
It's okay. We have a whole bag left. It's not even good.
I know. I got like
100 grand.
Butterfingers, which is my least favorite.
Crunch.
Yeah.
And Musketeers. The most rando bag.
It is. I know.
That, I guess Nestle? Is that a Nestle?
Yes, no
Nestle
idea.
Crunch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they...
Yeah.
This is the disposable ones.
But I made it.
Regulars.
I tried to make up for the not so popular candy by going out and replenishing the table in my costume.
Yeah, costume was good.
Yeah, it had like one of those big inflatable
unicorn.
Yeah, it was a unicorn, not
unicorn.
like the you see the dinosaur ones.
Same thing.
Yeah, but it was a unicorn, and there were people walking around. I think it gave people a chuckle to see the 7-foot unicorn running
Sure.
down the driveway to refill the candy every now and then.
Well, look, I will say we did get a lot of good feedback. We got a lot of participation. We got a lot of listenership. And for that, we appreciate it. Look, we'd like to thank those from the United States, Canada, Australia, Egypt, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Costa Rica, France, India, New Zealand, Poland, and Russia. Specifically during the month of October, you guys have been amazing and sticking with us. We appreciate it. More specifically in the United States, we'd like to thank our home state of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Florida, California, Delaware, Illinois, New York, New Hampshire, Texas, Arizona, Virginia, Indiana, North Carolina, Ohio, Mississippi, Colorado, Maryland, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Utah, Washington State, and of course, parts unknown. Look, I'm looking at the map right now, and the Midwest has been filled. So we appreciate you guys participating throughout the month. We appreciate the fact that you've taken an interest in the show. It is still growing week by week. We appreciate it. We're approaching our 2500 download. We appreciate that very much. This has started all the way from March, I think, of 2020 until right now. So we are approaching month 8 of this. So I considering that we're a small scale podcast, we're not one of the head honchos. I consider this to be good. I like this. I like the fact that we have a strong, yet, not overly huge, but good listener base that comes back week after week, and we appreciate that. I envision this of every week I look at the numbers of downloads and stuff and the consistency where those downloads are, and I say to myself, imagine we were talking in front of these people live week after week. We'd be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And the fact that people are listening to us week after week is overwhelming in and of itself. So we appreciate that very much.
Yeah. It'd be really cool to be able to interact more, to hear what they think, if they're sticking around and they're hearing what we're saying every week. It would be cool to kind of have it be more of like a conversation. Especially, we talk all the time about how we're from the tiny little state of Rhode Island and neither of us have traveled very much and all that.
I've been to Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple times.
I've been to Toronto.
Yeah. But anyway, it's awesome that we have listeners all over the country and all over the world. It's really awesome.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, if you've stumbled upon this by accident or you're curious or the presidential election somehow, for some reason, interests you, we'd like to welcome you to the show. I don't know why you'd be interested in that. We'd like to welcome you to the show. If you haven't yet, you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, Deezer, Radio Public, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast fix from, we are there. We appreciate it. If you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, to leave us 5 stars and a quick review. It helps us out a bunch. And if you don't have access to an Apple Podcast or you're an Android user or what have you, you can leave us a review on our Facebook page where we primarily put out all the content and interaction outside of Instagram to better connect with you. And if you utilize those social platforms, you can hit us up. Cindy, why don't you go over that?
So we're on Facebook at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping, on Instagram at whileshe'snapping, and on Twitter at she'snappingpod. Or you can email us at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into this. So this is being advertised, I guess is the correct term. This is being brought out and discussed as the most important election in, I guess, modern history. Would you agree? Modern history?
I would.
And it seems that unlike 2016, people are taking that to heart and people are taking this election a lot more seriously, I should say, and they're approaching this as important. So record numbers so far in terms of early voting. I'm sure on Tuesday there will be an incredible amount of people coming out to vote, probably shattering records. Obviously, we can take that into consideration of this might have happened anyway with the fact that more people are turning 18 because there are more people in the country. That happens
every year.
So the numbers definitely do go up, but the engagement in the early voting, I think, is an indicator of how important this is in comparison to what will happen on Tuesday. So what, in a broad sense, what does this one mean to you? I know there's that's a very general question, but what are you looking to see, and how are you looking for this to unfold, I guess?
Well, I guess first quickly, based on what you said about the numbers of early voting, that's definitely true. But I think the caveat is that way more people are early voting because of the pandemic.
Correct.
So it's to be expected that the early voting numbers will be unprecedented because way less voters are going to go to the polls on election day because they voted early or voted by mail. But even with that being said, I think the numbers are still pretty unprecedented.
Right.
But anyway, it's really hard. It makes it very difficult to compare it to 2016. Because you can't put your finger on what it is. So I guess in terms of, I don't even know where to begin. What was your question? What the election means to me?
How important is this one to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many angles to look at this from, and I think it's been interesting to kind of see the shift in my own perspective of, in terms of how politically engaged I've been throughout my life. And I feel like I've always had pretty strong political views.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never really gotten very engaged. And I think the reason why this year was different is because there is so much at stake. And to me, it's just so obvious that this is a different moment. And the fact that we are just in an unprecedented time in terms of COVID, in terms of climate change, in terms of racial justice. I mean, it's just, and then everything with the Supreme Court and losing RBG and women's rights and reproductive rights. It's literally like everything that I care about, and that I care about for my future and for our daughter's future.
Right.
We've talked about how I work in the environmental field professionally. So that's everything with climate change is so important. And I think it has been touched on this election, but obviously, COVID has taken a front seat. And it's just, I look back on 2016 and the dread that I felt then and how I felt waking up the next morning when you came in and told me that Trump won the election. And I was obviously crushed, and I felt like, I don't even know what the word is, so disappointed and scared, but I did not imagine it being even this bad.
No, I remember waking up and looking at the results because I wake up way earlier than you. And
I had called it an early night because I saw things starting to turn, and I was like, I need to go to bed because I can't do this.
I woke up and I saw that he won, and I said, well, fuck it, it's leg day, so might as well crush leg day. And I remember finishing up, coming back into the room and saying to you, Trump's our president. And you said, you're fucking with me.
I did. I really thought you were joking.
And I said, no, I wouldn't lie to you about this. He won. And I remember you just bawling. And for me, I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe it's not going to be that bad. Like, maybe he uses this extreme rhetoric to sort of rile up his base, get the votes, and then over time he'll become more centered, because that tends to be what happens with a lot of politicians. They hardly ever do they stick to what they try to set out in the beginning of their campaign, especially non-incumbents, right? They tend to over embellish and stick with a lot of hyperbole
by reality and by the
checks and balances that are
and the administration and people who actually know what they're talking about surrounding them, but not this time.
Well, I remember the day after he was interviewed, and I forget where it was. It might have been Good Morning America, or I don't even know, but they were, for some reason, transgendered rights came up, and he was very level-headed, and he said, I believe anybody should use the bathroom that they feel comfortable using. And it wasn't the Trump that I was used to on the campaign trails, very, again, hyperbolic and intense. He just said, I think those that want to use the bathroom that they feel comfortable in ought to be able to. And I said, okay, here we go. This is the start of moving to the center, and maybe he's not this extreme right-winger that I thought.
And it was more of a show to get elected.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I said, maybe this is an indicator. And I sort of held on to that. And then and this obviously lasted a couple of months. He sort of re-embellished his base and whatnot. And then the speech, his inauguration speech, when he's, America first. And I said, okay, no, it was all, this is what he believes.
Yeah.
He believes in this, and maybe the whole, you should use the bathroom that you feel comfortable in. Maybe that was all for show. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe that was his daughter sort of whispering in his ear. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, and again, I'm a straight white male, okay?
Mm-hmm.
My life has not changed at all. And I feel very fortunate that that's happened. So it's really hard for me to take the blinders off and sort of look at it in other people's perspective. I really have tried to, especially with the course of this podcast. I've been trying my damnedest having these conversations. I just feel that there are a lot of people out there that have been impacted by everything that's been going on, that the need and the overwhelming desire for him to be removed from office, especially those that have been impacted that are unlike me, whether that be women or transgendered or anybody else in the LGBTQ communities or people of color or what happened.
Right.
I feel there's an overwhelming sense of this needs to be fixed, and they're trying their damnedest now to make that happen. The unfortunate part for me is there is not an overwhelming sense of support for Biden. It's an overwhelming sense of we need to get Trump out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a message that the Biden campaign has been trying to overcome, but and we kind of saw it during the debates, it's really hard when you're going up against a just plain bully.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard not to get on the defense and point out, like, and to me, I'm like, it feels so human nature to just be like, but look, like, how could you, like, how is it even, like, within reality that you have to come up with a good reason why this man should not be our president? Like, he says it for himself. Like, everything he does says why he shouldn't be president. And I think the Biden campaign has been trying to illustrate why Biden is a good candidate and what he would do for our country and what his plans are. And he has those things. He has plans to deal with all of those crises that I mentioned at the beginning. But it doesn't even have a chance to be talked about because Trump steals the headlines with his extremism all the time. And it's next to impossible to get the right messages through when it's overshadowed by his extravagance and ridiculousness and misinformation too.
Yeah, I think the thing is, though, the sense that I get when it comes to people that are more centrist and not those that are in the far right QAnons and the hardcore Trumpists. They say, look, I don't like him. I would never have dinner with him. I don't think he's a good example for my children. I think he's a disgusting human being, but he puts more money in my pocket. Or they say, but fuck Pelosi. And they
just hate Democrats so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think you have, and I think this is fair, you have a lot of voices on the left, like AOC. What is it? What's their group called?
The Squad.
The Squad, that's what they call themselves. Not to say that they are not good at what they do, or they don't have good ideas, or they're not smart people. And I'm not just saying this because they're women. That has nothing to do with it. But they, in terms of what Trump has done, represent the far left of the Democratic Party, right? Biden is a very centrist Democrat, or he's more to the center than
right. Not according to
they
the
are.
Trump campaign now.
Sure,
though.
yeah, but
That's what I'm saying. You have to be on the defense.
but when I'm, objectively,
Yeah.
Biden is more
Right.
center
But looking
than-
at the primary
than far.
candidates, he was certainly one of the more moderate.
Right. And so when you look at individuals like AOC and the rest of the squad, I can understand why people have a deflection towards that may be outside of our demographic, not millennials. Millennials seem to gravitate towards that.
Well, a lot of millennials think that he's not progressive enough.
Sure, but
Yeah.
I'm saying millennials, exactly. So you're
Yeah.
making my point.
Right.
They seem to gravitate towards the ideals and the ideologies that AOC and
Right.
co sort of push out, but they are voting for not Trump, right? And that's the problem.
Well, I think I want to push back on that because I think that that's obviously a factor, a huge factor. But I think first of all, a lot of those, the politicians further on the left of the spectrum have endorsed Biden and are...
they have to, though.
But yes, you're right. I understand what you're saying. But I also think, and he has made... he's indicated that he's willing to move on the spectrum one way or the other. I think that there's...
But again, is that true or is that hyperbole from a politician?
I understand that. I understand. Politics is politics. I get it. But I'm saying all you can do is look at the information that's available to you and what is being said by the campaign and what is being said by all of the other his colleagues and that are further left and all of that. And I just think there's unity in the Democratic Party that I haven't seen in a very long time.
But how much of that is no more Trump?
Even if that's true, what does that tell you
I get
about
it.
the desperation?
No, I get it. I just find it to
that
be...
we are in.
We're going to get into predictions in the second half of the show, but I fear that that's going to come off as disingenuous. That's going to come across as...
I think it's an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for the Democratic Party to work together. And I think...
they're going to.
Right. And I think this has provided a foundation, sort of a platform where there is a lot of cooperation and a lot of discussion and a lot of learning happening, even within the people in the Democratic Party who have different approaches. I think that's a good thing. I think that is progress.
Sure. Look, the way I look at it, though, is that, again, maybe the role reversal has occurred. Remember in 2016, those that were hardcore anti-Trump were called the silent majority.
Right.
They were very, very reluctant to come out and openly admit that I'm a Trump supporter.
Right. Which is what contributed to his win, I believe.
And we didn't anticipate that because the polls didn't demonstrate or rather reflect those individuals. I worry about that this time, too. I really do.
I mean... Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say now that he's been president for the past 4 years, they have been emboldened and they've been more confident in showcasing their support for Trump. Moreover, all right. So again, we live in the suburbs, but it is a rural part of Rhode Island in comparison to the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Our town is red.
It's very red.
Yeah.
When he was running in 2016, I didn't see Trump flags.
Right. That's when we were moving here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We moved here
were
in
here
July,
for a long time.
right?
Yeah.
We moved here just a few months before the election.
Right.
In 2016. And honestly,
I didn't see any.
I know. Well, I did.
Maybe a couple.
Like here and there. I know. And if I saw what I was seeing now,
we wouldn't have moved here.
I would have had some serious second thoughts about moving here.
We just wouldn't. And, we see banners outside of houses coupled with 3 or 4 flags.
There's one house that has a cardboard cutout of him in their window.
Yeah. It's... So I wonder, going back to the reversal, I wonder now if the silent majority is no more Trump. I can't even call them Biden supporters. I don't know many people that support Biden. Like, for instance, today in the Warwick area of Rhode Island, near Rocky Point and whatnot, there was a huge Trump parade to show support for Trump. You'll never see that for Biden here.
Okay, the other thing, you're right. So there's 2 things. There's the yard signs and the flags and everything. Trump is I think the flags are pretty unique to him. Like there's not Biden flags. It's like a yard sign.
Sure.
So it's way more like in your face, I think, when people put out Trump things. And there's never only one. If someone has a Trump flag or a Trump sign,
There's something
there's
else.
others. Yeah. It's like all out.
Sure.
So they're very vocal from that perspective. I do think that they're more emboldened because I think there are people who do support Biden, but don't want to put it out there because they're kind of nervous about the reaction from if you live in a neighborhood like ours that's surrounded. And not to say that Trump supporters are necessarily, I'm not saying all Trump supporters are bad people or dangerous people. It's just the tension is so high and it's just very uncomfortable because it's just uncomfortable.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, if Trump wins, you're going to see a lot of people rejoice that are Trump supporters, and a lot of people that didn't want Trump in office just protest this. They're not going to come up and start fighting. There will probably
they did in 2016, the march, the Not My
different.
President.
This will be different.
It will be, but I'm saying it happened before, but
this will be heightened. I think that if, and I've said this to you before, the unfortunate reality, I believe, and again, I'm not in the camp that I think there's going to be a civil war as a result of this either way. I'm not there yet. I know a lot of people like to push that and to sort of glorify that in a way, and it's very clickbaity and almost pornographic. I'm not there.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, obviously, when you look at those with hardcore Second Amendment right positions, those are usually Trump supporters. Or rather, Trump supporters are usually those that have hardcore Second Amendment rights support.
I think the first way you said it was right.
Sure, regardless.
But, yeah.
If there were to be a group of people to start, killing as a result of the election, it'd be if Trump lost, right? So if Trump loses, his base will cry foul and say, his base is more likely to cry foul and say, this is rigged. We need to take our country back. And they're the base that is more likely to initiate a civil war. That's not to say this will happen. That's not
But
to say that I think they will.
But that's not what the right says. The right says Antifa, and they're the ones who are already rioting and looting and all this. They're the violent protesters, which just doesn't have a lot of truth to it, like in the first place.
My point is, outside looking in.
Yes. I think the big part of that is that Trump has already said that he won't concede. And
he said we'll have to see.
Yeah, but if it goes in his favor, he'll won't question it. But
yes.
If it doesn't, then he will not commit to the peaceful transfer of power.
We don't know that. He never said that. He never said he wouldn't commit to the peaceful transfer.
No, but that's what it is. By not, I'm saying he didn't commit to it. He didn't say, I commit to accept the results of the election. So he has not committed to that. And all of the variables that are surrounding this with the pandemic and with all of the mail-in voting and the early voting and the confusion over the different rules in the different states. And it's just giving something for him to kind of focus on, to say, this is why I lost, and blame it on that and create doubt in the results.
Yes.
And that's dangerous for the reason that you just said.
Of course it's dangerous. Look, if Trump wins, there's just going to be a lot of protests, and there's going to be a lot of people going to the streets in your downtown area. It's going to be a lot of parades and whatnot during his inauguration. It will be an amplified version of 2016. That's all it will be. And I don't think anyone's going to get hurt. And if it is, it's going to be because of fights have started. I don't see the left trying to initiate harm onto other people as a result.
Right.
I think they are less likely to do it. The flip side, though, is if Biden wins, I'm not saying the right will do this. I'm not saying Republicans or Trump supporters will do this. I'm saying of the two parties, they are more likely to start shit and say, this is rigged. We need to fucking take our country back by any means necessary. And if that means casualties of civil war, so be it.
Well, that's the irony, is that I feel like the left, if Trump wins and the left organizes to protest the results, it's going to be because there was some decision that was made in regards to mail-in ballots or something, votes that didn't get counted.
It has to be indisputable.
Right. It has to be landslide.
He needs 300 plus votes in the Electoral College.
I mean, that's kind of an abstract number.
It can't be 272 or
right.
275.
No, right. It has to be a landslide. Yes.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is the left, if they organize to contest the results, it's going to be because they're as a result of...
Talking about the left or the right?
The left.
Okay.
It'll be to demand that votes get counted, that people's voice gets heard. Like, that's the irony of this whole thing. When Trump says that it's rigged, the election is rigged, I don't understand, because all of the efforts to suppress votes are being pushed by the Republican Party.
Right.
They don't want mail-in ballots to be counted. They're closing polling places. They're removing drop boxes. And every time a decision is made to have mail-in ballots be accepted, as long as they're postmarked by election day, but if they're received up to 3 days after, they could be accepted. This is for every state is different. I'm not saying this is necessarily what it is in your state, but whenever a decision like that is made that supports and makes it easier for people to vote, it's viewed as a win for the Democrats. And I'm like, why is that a partisan win? That's a win for everybody who's voting.
Because statistically,
I know.
No, statistically, Democrats are less likely to show up on election day.
And especially right now during the pandemic.
So that's why it's viewed as a win.
I agree. And I'm saying that's messed up because both parties should want every voter to be able to exercise their right to vote.
I get it. Look, it's regardless of all this, it is important that we have our voices heard. It's really important that everyone does vote. Again, 2016 was the very first time in my life that I had voted. And to be fair, I had 2 elections before that to vote. And so I didn't know enough. And it was twofold. I didn't know enough about who was it first. It was Obama versus McCain, and then Obama versus
Romney.
I didn't know enough about either candidate or I wasn't really into politics. So voting would have been irresponsible in hindsight. The primary reason why I didn't vote is because I was and still sort of am of the opinion that my vote, my singular vote, counts directly towards that victory, that person's win or loss, regardless in anything else I do. And the presidential race is apparently the exception because of the Electoral College. I cry foul. I feel that your vote, your specific vote, should count directly and be tallied towards who becomes president.
I
then my vote legitimately matters in every possible way.
I know that. But you do realize that even not in a presidential election, there are other elections where you can vote locally or for senators or congressmen or, your local town council, whatever, that your vote does count that way.
It counts for everything but the president.
Right, but I'm saying, so you use the Electoral College as an excuse not to vote in any of the other elections too.
Because again, secondarily, I was not in tune with the political climate or any of the policies, so it would have been irresponsible for me to vote. I disagree
with that statement that it would have been irresponsible. I think it was irresponsible not to become educated and not vote.
Of course, it's twofold. But if on election day I didn't know enough about it and I chose not to educate myself about it, I'm not going to go vote. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like seeing an article on Twitter and just retweeting it and not reading it. You should read the material.
Is there someone who does that? Is there someone who retweets stuff on Twitter who doesn't actually know what it is?
I mean,
is that a thing?
I know what you're referring to, but that's actually a thing that Twitter now, before you retweet things, will say, "Did you read this?"
Wow.
Did you read the article? So interesting. Yeah. Look, that being said, I know we have a lot to cover. Let's take a quick break right here, and we'll get back to more issues and more things to say about the election, plus our prediction. So hang tight. We'll be right back.
All right. So in this series on the election, we touched on 3 other topics that were specific. And I thought maybe we could loop back real quick to those topics
Sure.
and talk about anything that has happened since we recorded.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on predictions, so we can save that to the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the meat and peanut butter, baby.
Oh, yeah. You're freaking peanut butter. So we had done, these aren't going to be in order, I don't think, of the episodes. But anyway.
Chronological order. Yeah.
Yeah. We did an episode on political correctness a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And one thing that I realized shortly after that episode that we did not touch on is the whole concept of masks and how that wearing a mask has become being, if you wear a mask and someone on the right is criticizing you for being PC by wearing a mask, that whole idea boggles my mind. I guess I shouldn't even say someone on the right criticizes you. I mean, I guess it could just be anybody who views this as being a political or politicized thing.
It's the right.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair. But I want to be careful about generalizing.
Or I should say primarily Trump supporters.
Sure. Yeah. People who think that it's just not necessary. And that actually reminds me really quick back to something you said in the first half about the parade, the Trump parade.
Yeah.
The other reason why you're not seeing that for Biden is because people are respecting the pandemic.
I think you wouldn't see it either.
Maybe, but I feel like it's really unfair to compare their events and rallies and things because Trump and his supporters are just completely pretending like nothing is happening. And I think Biden's campaign is making an effort to make their events safe and not a ton of people and everyone wears masks and all that kind of thing.
Piggybacking off of that, and this sort of ties in with the political correctness, the mask thing, and sort of QAnon as well. When you hear, Trump supporters or the parades or the rallies, and then there was actually a study that was released, I think it was from Harvard, I'm not sure, that said there's been over 10,000 confirmed coronavirus cases linked to rallies. So that doesn't mean 10,000 people caught the virus at the rallies. It's
through
spread.
The contact tracing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when people read that, or when we talk about lockdowns, or when we talk about caps on social gatherings in terms of the quantity of people, people say, well, people can go out and protest and no one bats an eye. And there's 2 reasons why no one bats an eye. First of all, more importantly, it's a constitutional right. You can't take that away. You just can't. Having someone over your house for Thanksgiving and Christmas, it sucks that it can't happen. It's not a constitutional right. It's just not. So you can't take that away, just like Trump supporters, your right to bear arms or your right to say whatever insensitive things you want to say can't be taken away because of your First Amendment rights. You have the right to say it. Yep. Secondly, those at the protests, the vast majority of them were wearing masks.
And they're outside.
Right. So this all sort of ties in with everything you're saying. Yes, masks have become politicized. It's become a subject of political correctness. If you wear it, you're sort of a sheeple, or what part of the sheeple. And ties in with the QAnon conspiracy, and it ties in with the spreading, or rather lack thereof, the prevention of the spread of coronavirus. So for me, the way I look at it, as you have a lot of noise, and this sort of ties into political correctness and what we were talking about in the first half, you have a lot of noise on both sides, and they're equally as loud. Although on the right side, it's usually sort of vitriolic, is that a word? Full of vitriol, I should say.
Sure.
And on the left, it's a lot of trying to correct people's misbehaviors, quote unquote, when it comes to social, I don't want to say norms, but social perceptions of things like transgenderism and whatnot. And it's very, very, very loud.
Right. I think you're trying to describe education in a way.
Yes.
I mean,
no.
I don't mean to say that.
So
like
the vast majority of people, I feel, are somewhere in the middle.
Right.
They're just not looking to say, "Oh, QAnon, oh, the deep state," and on the left, they're not saying, "Oh, correct pronouns, oh, call me sir." I don't think of the middle. Not to say they don't care, but that's not a priority to them.
Well, I think that, at least from my perspective, I feel like a lot of people, at least in my circle, in my realm, appreciate the opportunity for a conversation.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. It's not yelling and shoving things down people's throat. It's
more
having
of
a conversation.
Hey man, let's find out where we differ.
And I feel like, that's what most people want.
But
that's
it's
not the
because
voices
of the
that get
loudness
heard. Right.
and the volume on the extreme sides that you're not hearing the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You're not hearing or towards the middle side that, you have the deep, deep, deep blue and the deep, deep, deep red, and you're not hearing the pink and the light blue. Right. You don't hear the in-betweens talk. And I feel that is where everyone's frustration is. Mm-hmm. Those that are on the fence and are leaning Trump are saying, I'm tired of living in this world where I may mistakenly call someone sir and they're really a female and I just didn't know it. I'm getting, death threats now and saying I should be fired from my job.
When in reality, someone might
it's just a mistake.
Right. And someone will probably politely correct you.
Right.
And as long as you respond with respect.
Right.
And
or on the flip side,
I
just want to go to the grocery store and wear a mask and have someone tell me I'm not being a sheeple. Like, I don't want that. I just want to get my groceries.
Give me a side eye because...
Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the amplification of those voluminous, outcries from both sides is what's really confusing the issues. And when you have this, I'm the type of guy that doesn't really like to get caught in the weeds when it comes to this stuff. And again, if I call someone by their incorrect pronoun and they politely say, "Hey man," or "Hey sir," or whatever, it's actually Miss or Mrs. or he, she, whatever, I'd say, okay, yeah, cool. But if someone jumps down my throat about it, I'll say, whoa, I didn't mean any disrespect or offense. I just didn't know, and I'm sorry. And that, if I can imagine that someone that, and I'm just using this as an example, chances are this would never happen, but someone that was undecided, that had an altercation with that kind of experience, maybe that would sway their decision in a way.
Yeah, but how often do those altercations?
Probably not.
That's what
it's
I mean.
Not. Or again, if I'm going to be unbiased here, on the flip side, if someone, if I'm undecided and I'm wearing a mask and some crazy person comes up to me and says it's just a hoax, deep state, and pulls my mask off and coughs on me, okay, I'm not voting for your guy at all.
Yeah, but those things, so that's what I think is so interesting, is that those interactions don't usually happen in real life.
No, but that's what people are seeing on the internet.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. And that's even more amplified by COVID, because we are not gathering as much in our social circles. We are not having these conversations in person. We are being bombarded with things on social media and online that represent the extreme cases and the rare instances that get a ton of shares, that go viral, and that's what you're seeing. And that's how you think the world is functioning, when really it's not. I mean, I've been to the grocery store every week since COVID started, and I haven't seen a Karen yelling at people with her mask off.
No.
I mean, it's not happening on a regular basis as much as the internet would like us to think that it is. Not to say it's not a problem. I mean, it's a problem when people are out there doing this shit. Like, that's not okay. But I just think our perception and our perspective is so skewed because we're living in such an isolated world right now.
Yeah, let's put it this way. And obviously, this may illuminate how uncommon these situations are, right? So outside of a pandemic, outside of a deeply divided country in terms of political parties, let's just look at getting murdered, right? And usually on the news, oh, this person got shot and murdered. Oh, that person was murdered. And that sort of over-sensationalizes the risk of murder and exaggerates how risky, oh, everyone's getting murdered, headline murder, headline. But the vast majority of people in this country are not getting murdered. It's just the numbers are deeply outweighing those that are getting murdered. It's a very small percentage of the population. Mm-hmm. And we intuitively get that. We walk out without fear of being mugged or murdered, or I don't...
Even though we know it happens.
Yeah, it happens, but I think there's an intuitive understanding that it's a very small percentage of people. Is it a risk? Yeah. Could I get murdered? Of course I could. Am I likely to get murdered? No, I'm just not. And I think everybody has that sort of understanding. Now we can link this back to these examples. Are Karens out there yelling at the Target manager? Of course there are. Mm-hmm. Are there people that are anti-maskers, flipping out and causing a scene? Of course. Are there transgendered people out there that are really angrily telling people, like that person that said, "It's ma'am," and that became a big
right, but that's your one example of that ever happening.
Yes, I think that happens, but they're very, very few and far between. They do not represent their, demographic, I guess you can say. They do not represent that quote-unquote tribe. They really don't. And so to think that, well, I can't vote, and maybe I'm guilty of it too, I can't vote for Trump because of his supporters. No, that's not why I'm not voting for Trump. I'm not voting for Trump because I think he sucks. That's the reason. It has, his supporters could be completely just like me, and I'm still not going to vote for him.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You said in the beginning that kind of, your life hasn't really changed this year.
It hasn't.
Well, right. And I know what you mean by that. I completely get what you're saying.
Outside of a pandemic,
but that's what I mean. But and again, that's kind of at the forefront for everybody right now, because the way that he talks, he has no plan to get us out of this. And our life has been affected, just obviously not as much as other people. We've been fortunate to both still be working. We still have childcare available to us. Like we're doing well. We're healthy. But, we haven't seen some of our family members and friends in almost a year. And they're missing, our child growing up. And it's sad and it sucks. And it's a lot of anxiety and there's so much to it, but I just want someone who has a plan to address.
He does have a plan to do nothing and herd immunity.
To just keep saying that, it's just going to disappear. It's like a miracle. It goes away. We have a vaccine, couple weeks.
No. His plan is herd immunity.
By a lot of people dying.
Yes.
That's the only way you obtain herd immunity without a vaccine.
Yes.
And we don't even know if there's such a thing as immunity. We don't even know how long you're immune after you even have the virus.
Oh, we have evidence to suggest that you're not immune for a while. You're not immune for long.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
So herd immunity, we're never going to reach herd immunity if even people who catch the virus are not going to be immune 6 months later.
Right.
That's never going to happen. People are just going to keep dying.
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing that is on people's radar right now is the coronavirus. And again, this is going to light up those conspiracy theorists. The amount of people I've talked to that said it's going to be over after the election. Someone at my place of work said that to me, and I looked at her dead, serious as a heart attack, right into her eyes. And I said, "You don't mean that. You're smarter than that." And she said, "Well, I don't mean it's just going to disappear. I just don't think people are going to be as worried about it." And I said, or she said, rather, I don't think it's going to be as highlighted on the news
in the media
as much. And I do think there's an element of truth to that. I do think when you look at MSNBC, CNN, a lot of left-leaning news sources, the main ones, they do sort of over-sensationalize it. And I'm not saying the severity of the coronavirus. I'm saying this is why we need Trump out. This is it. This is it. This is it. And if Biden were to win, it wouldn't be talked about as much. We just go over the daily fatalities and the numbers, and it wouldn't be, this is why things need to be cleaned up. You know what I mean?
Right. I understand what you're saying. I think there's an element of that, but I also think the other element is that because we're more likely to be on a path towards overcoming it. Like, we're going to have a plan. We're not going to be flailing around everywhere where states shutting down, opening up, closing certain businesses, people losing their jobs, people like,
of course,
there's not going to be as much news once we actually kind of get a handle on it and we actually have a fucking plan to not have hundreds and thousands of more people dying.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not saying the concerns aren't legitimate. They are legitimate concerns.
Right, I'm saying the reason that it won't be in the media isn't because it's like an election issue necessarily. Sure. I think that there will genuinely be less news associated with COVID once we actually start to make progress.
Well, we won't be able to do that until January if Biden were to be elected anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, so make no mistake about it, there is an element of truth to that, but I do push back on the notion that, no, this is not going away.
It's a global pandemic. Why do people think it's like centered on the U.S. election.
Because Trump has done a magnificent job. And this is not hyperbole or sarcasm. He has done a magnificent job of training his followers that any negative press or anything that could be perceived as putting him in a negative light can't be true. It's fake news.
So coronavirus doesn't exist in the rest of the world? Is that the reality these people ascribe to?
It's being over-embellished. They're not actually suffering from coronavirus, according to these people. There are secondary conditions that they are suffering from.
Oh, that's the other thing. Yeah. We talked about that during the pandemic, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I don't agree with that sentiment at all, but this is
maybe it's because we're from a small state and there's very few degrees of separation between us and anyone who does like any given profession. But like, how do these people who think that it's not real not know anyone in their life who has either lost someone to the virus or is a frontline worker who is seeing it firsthand? Like, how do you not know someone? Like, there are plenty of firsthand accounts like that you should know personally.
Fingers in the ears.
It's just, like, how do you not see it? I don't understand.
Because none of that matters to them.
Yeah.
And to a degree, unfortunately, it doesn't matter to those that are voting against Trump. It really doesn't. What matters is keeping him in or getting him out. That's what matters. And coronavirus, solving that issue, is secondary to that.
I don't think that's true.
I'm not saying it's a far less of a concern. I'm saying right now the primary goal of either side is my team needs to win or my team needs to win.
I think that's oversimplifying it, though, because it's not just because people hate Trump that they don't want him in there and because they think they don't like him as a person. It's
I
because
think that
of
is the primary reason.
I disagree with you. I think it's because of all the implications of what it means for him to stay in office or not. It's because of all these other issues that are happening that are just going to, we're just going to continue to crumble. Like, when people say, like, now the flags say, keep America great again. Like, how the fuck is America any better now than it was 4 years ago? And you're saying keep it great? Like, what do you mean keep it?
That's interesting because, again, I don't buy into polls. I don't like looking at polls. I don't like looking at polls as an indicator because 2016 taught me not to. I think,
agree.
But there was, again, you can take this as a grain of salt just like I did, but there was a poll, I think it was in the New York Times. So again, could be biased, could not be, don't know, that say actually people now feel that they're better off than they were 4 years ago.
How?
I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
Only wealthy people, maybe?
Yeah. It could have, again, it's
wealthy people who have good health care, who have steady jobs, who have money in the bank to fall back on, who aren't worried about their day-to-day existence. Sure.
I think what
who've
people
gotten
see
tax breaks.
is, a president that isn't political. I think that they see that as a benefit, and he's not. And to his credit, he's largely been consistent with everything he's wanted to do, minus the wall, which again, that has not been brought up once.
I know that was like the cornerstone of his
not been brought up
campaign in 2016, along with the emails.
In neither debate wasn't brought up.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting, but
well, he says it's built.
He's largely been consistent with what he has represented as a president from president-elect till today. Mm-hmm. He's been the same person. Yeah. He's been tough on China. He really has, in terms of trades, in terms of the deficit, or at least trying to overcome the deficit that we've had with China. I think he has been working towards that, and economists or people with large amount of monies and companies and whatnot, Fortune 500, they probably really like that about him. More money in the pockets of the haves instead of the have-nots, and the haves, we all know, dictate the pace of the planet, so they like Trump. And I think when it comes to middle America, the blue collar workers, I think they like the fact that he is a strong supporter of police and strong. It defund the police or reform the police is not something that comes out of his mouth. And I think people in that demographic feel comforted as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. So hold on, I want to go back to your China thing. I understand, like, so the thing that sticks out to me about that is that that's all about economics and business, which is what he polls highest in consistently, is the economy. And of course, now the economy's in the tank, but he has the excuse of the pandemic. But what just screams at me from that is that is something that is so specific about economics, and I guess it's also, you know, international relations, but it's devoid of science. Like economics in and of itself, I understand, is like a science sort of, in a way, but it's not like anything that has to do with science, like the pandemic and climate change, is just like, it's like it doesn't exist. Like he doesn't want to even talk to the people who are experts in these things. And something like climate and a global pandemic are both also things that require international cooperation, and he's pulling back from all of that. And the America First message, I get it. I understand that, especially from an economic perspective. But when you're talking about things like viruses and the environment that don't give a shit about administrative boundaries and states and countries and borders, you can't pretend like you can only care about your own bubble.
I think that is human nature, to disregard future me problems.
It's not. It's right now.
The
virus and climate?
The virus is a right now thing. I think people don't view climate change as a right now thing. Because
tell that to California.
I feel you. I'm just saying the vast majority of people that live in this country that, you know, whether or not they're aware of climate change and believe in it or not, they're still conducting their business every day as they would. The vast majority. I'm not saying there are not people that are working towards improving these situations. I'm sure there are. Apparently, though, people are still acting as if nothing happens. Like, how many people do you know have made radical life changes to do things to combat climate change?
Right. Well, my answer to that, we did a whole episode on climate change where I talked about how I think it's great when people make individual choices that are better for the environment, but that's not where the real issue isn't being made by our everyday decisions. It's at a larger scale, and that's what I mean. We need to have international, global cooperation, and if that's not happening, then me bringing my reusable bags to the grocery store isn't gonna matter in the long run. So that's where I get so frustrated about that. It's like, okay, great, he's working with China. Wonderful. What the fuck is he doing for these bigger picture issues like a global pandemic and climate change, which you have to work with other countries and not make us look like idiots that don't know how to listen to scientists. Yeah. Your next point about the police, really quick, is that's one thing that I get very frustrated with because, yes, the defund the police term is, I think, a misnomer in general. That's usually not what people are referring to, but you should say also reform. And I think that is such a line in the sand that's been drawn that I think is unfair, because even someone like me, who's obviously very liberal, I know police officers. I support our police officers. I value having police to protect the community. And I know that our police officers do things. They put themselves at risk, and they also do a lot for their communities. And the vast majority are very good people. And I get that. That does not mean that there is not a systemic problem within our policing system.
I'm not saying there's not. And I'm not saying that any of that is invalid. I think people take issues, especially undecided voters, take issues prima facie. It's, I hear defund the police, not my guy.
I know. That's why I take issue with that, because it's not fair. I feel like that is you can support the police officers in your life. You can value what they do and the sacrifices that they make, and recognize that the majority of them are good people that end up making bad decisions because of the system and the culture that exists in our police departments in this country. And to say that there are things that we could do to improve that, to improve the relations with the community, to have more accountability in place for police that do make bad decisions, and kind of disband the mentality that they're immune,
right,
and can do no wrong. I don't see why those have to be conflicting ideas.
This is an episode that we can do
in and of itself.
Yeah. I don't want to really unpack it too much. I just think, yes, it's frustrating and people ought to do a little bit more research when it comes to it. It's just a lot of people are face value. A lot of people are
I feel
headline.
like if people know that if they find out you support Biden, they think, oh, so you don't support our police?
Well, no, because he has said, I'm not in favor of defunding the police. In fact, I'm in favor of funding more.
Yes.
And
to enhance the community programs and things like that.
More training, more...
it's reform.
Sure.
Through funding.
Sure.
It's a different approach.
Well, defunding is moving funds or extrapolating some of the excess funds, quote unquote, that police get and put them into other areas. It's
redistributing.
Right.
Yes.
Regardless, we can do an episode in and of itself on that. But let's get into the nitty gritty. We're about an hour into this episode, and this is the meat and peanut butter that people want to get into. What do you think? Who's winning?
I won't let myself make a prediction.
Okay. Trump's winning.
I know that's what you think.
I can't find a way to be confident that I will see Biden winning this for a couple of reasons. Like I've said or insinuated throughout the show, he is not the person that represents someone that I feel the vast majority of people on the left are saying, yes, that's my guy. I think he is just put into place because he's familiar because of the vice presidency with Obama. He has strong political ties, so that makes him quote unquote experienced. And I don't mean that in a half-assed way. Because okay, fine, yes, but I'm
he's
not as president.
Politician.
Yes, he's an experienced politician.
Well, he's as close as you can get to being vice president.
I think people right now don't like the idea that there's a good chance that the person that they're voting for may die. I do feel that's on the minds of a lot of people out there. I do think that it is, and I've said this to you before, it is more likely, if you were to take the two candidates, who's the more likely to survive, natural causes survive the next 4 years, that'd be Trump over Biden. Who's the more likely of the two? It'd be Biden. It'd be Trump. And I do think that comes into play when people vote for their candidates. So in that regard, if I'm going to flip it, I think it's kind of cool that in a half-assed way or a roundabout way, you're voting for a black female maybe president. I think that's pretty cool. Right?
Yeah, we kind of teased this before. We've talked about this. I just think that's I think that's a total cop-out. If that's your reason not to vote for Biden because
I didn't
you
say
think
that's
he
the
might
primary
die.
reason. I think that's on the mind of
I
the
guess. I
undecided.
just, like I said, I can't wrap my head around how you would want to then vote for 4 more years of someone who is just completely like, I don't even know what the word is, like flushing us down the shitter. If Biden, and I also think the whole thing about him being dementia, Sleepy Joe, I know, but I'm saying, but that's contributing to your perception of him maybe not surviving even a 4-year term.
No, I'm not even thinking dementia. I'm just thinking of old age. Period.
Okay, but he's been made out to be even older,
sure,
through that whole persona.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That is what is happening. That's leaking into people's minds.
Sure.
And I don't think that's fair. I think you should vote for the candidate that aligns with your values, and especially if their administration, like you said, if they're picked for VP or whoever the other, the other cabinet members that they're going to surround themselves with align with your values, then if something unfortunate happens to your candidate before the end of their term, that's unfortunate, but I don't think that should be a reason not to vote for the person who aligns with what you think is right.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying this is my prediction.
Okay. I think you're overstating that.
that
component.
it is incredibly short-sighted and disrespectful to young voters or millennial voters for the Democratic Party to do this shit again. They did not learn a thing from 2016. The only thing they've done better is campaign in those battleground states that they lost in because Hillary didn't campaign in there. I'm talking Michigan. I'm talking no, she campaigned in Pennsylvania. Just those Midwestern states, right? And she just thought she had it in the bag.
Right.
My point is that it's an insult to the younger voters that are overwhelmingly outnumbering the older ones. So for the first time in history, the millennials outnumber the older generations. We are the largest in terms of quantity generation in the country.
But the older generations are still more likely to vote.
Yes, I'm just saying to have a candidate that doesn't appeal to them is insulting. So for instance, I know Bernie would have probably brought about the same concerns in terms of old age, but there's a real grassroots thing that he brought about with the millennials to really get in touch with what they wanted. And I don't see him nearly as dangerous in the eyes of Trump supporters as Biden is.
I disagree.
No. Biden has political ties that you can sort of wrap up and say, "Oh, he's evil. Look at this. He's got all these dealings with the son." They would find
something of Bernie,
I don't know.
or just the fact that they
Bernie's
call him
just a really good person.
But I think Biden is too.
I'm not saying he's not.
No, but I'm saying
but
they'll find a way to make him a villain.
There's something.
It doesn't matter because he's a socialist.
Grimy.
If they can make Biden into a socialist communist, look how easy it would have been for Bernie.
Outside of Bernie, Pete would have been great. I would have loved to have Pete.
I know.
Tulsi
there were a lot of good.
Would have loved to have Tulsi.
Not a fan of Tulsi.
I think that she's a fighter, and I don't think any of this shit would have happened under her watch. And I think people tremble because of her. I think she's viewed as tough. She is smart. She is level-headed.
She's a woman of color.
Great.
Trump would have he would have done what he does to her with all of the other women of color. The Squad, why do you think he attacks them the way they do?
She would have ripped him. She would have destroyed him.
I hope so, but how many times has AOC destroyed people on the floor and she still gets made fun of?
She's more centrist. Tulsi is more centrist, and she could have appealed to the other side.
Maybe. There were a lot of good candidates in the primary. I agree with you. We talked about this before. The system is not working. Everyone that I hear having these conversations on the left in the Democratic Party, there's a lot of acknowledgement that things are not working the way that they are. Our system is broken. We have gerrymandered districts all over the place. The Electoral College does not necessarily represent the population the way that it should. Reform in our election system needs to happen. And I think, at least within the circle that I operate in, that is being acknowledged across the board.
Sure.
And people are saying, even if Biden wins, we are just beginning our work.
Well, I do want to say this. I don't think it's as icky feeling as 2016 with Hillary. I do think in terms of me, Biden does represent a lot of the values that I'm looking for more than Hillary did. Mm-hmm. And Hillary, just the Clinton persona or the cloud of Clinton,
because of her husband.
Well, just there's a lot of
who's still one of the most liked presidents in history.
But there's still a lot of
blows my mind.
Kind of, there's something going on.
Sure.
This has nothing to do with the conspiracy theories of child molestation or anything like that. They've done some questionable shit in terms of politics, I'm sure.
Right. The name just rings a little like. Career politicians, sleazy,
it just leaves
something.
Me with a bad taste in my mouth. I do not feel that same we're dealing with two pieces of shit and which one is better. I don't have that same feeling like I did in 2016. I genuinely felt that. I genuinely felt that Hillary is just, I just don't know that she was a good candidate, but anybody but Trump, so this is my vote. That's how I walked into 2016. There's still an element of that, like I've been saying, no Trump
he wasn't
for 2020.
Biden.
Right, but I've always liked Kamala.
Yeah.
I've always, at least she sort of seems relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything else, and this is not the reason why I would vote for her, but the fact that she's so down to earth and listens to Kendrick Lamar, I'm saying, okay, you're at least
genuine.
relatable to me.
And it's
and we
genuine.
can have a conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe our views, hit the microphone again. Maybe our views on things differ greatly, but that's a good starting point that we can, you seem like a very down to earth type of person. Maybe you're not. Maybe that's just the political persona, but I'd like to find out. So in that regard, I don't have that same feeling, and I'm hoping other people do. But when I'm seeing, again, in polls in 538, I'm on there right now, they're saying that Biden has an 89 in 100 chance to win, so 89% chance to win this election.
God, don't tell me that.
And Trump has an 11. This is out of all the polls that have been issued. They just do a conglomerate of polls. To me, that's a bad sign. That's a really bad sign because I feel that the vast majority of Trump's base don't want to participate in these things, don't want to participate in the phone banking, don't want to be bothered by that because they're such conspiracy theorists that they're saying this is the deep state try to get me. Fuck you guys. I'm voting on Tuesday.
Yeah, but the phone banking is done by their own campaigns.
Yeah, and I think they're saying, no, go away.
To their own people?
Yes, I don't think they believe it's them. I think they believe it's an infiltration kind of thing.
Okay. I mean, they're doing door to door. They're doing,
and they're saying fuck off. I do not think they are participating.
What are you basing that on?
Just their personalities,
right? But you have no experience in that. Like,
I don't know.
I don't know where it's coming from.
This screams. Don't take this to heart. Don't bank on what the polls are saying, because
I'll
this
tell you,
is the same shit that happened in 2016.
I did phone bank for the Democrats, obviously, and I did get some Trump supporters in these swing states, and they are not shy about telling you who they're voting for and what they think.
No,
to someone on the phone.
I get that.
So why do you think it's so inaccurate?
I don't know. Maybe this is just my
It definitely
stubbornness.
could be inaccurate. I mean, I won't let myself look at the polls. I have not been on 538. I can't do it to myself.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I feel like we learned a lot. The polling, whatever companies that do the polling, they learned a lot from 2016, and I think they're trying to be cautious and fix the things that went wrong. But I still I won't do it.
Well, according to 538, they say Trump has a 10% chance of winning. A 10% chance of winning, which is what our forecast gives Trump, is roughly the same as the odds that it's raining in downtown Los Angeles, and it does rain there.
Right. He has a path.
Downtown LA has about
36
rainy days per year.
It's crazy when you look at, like, when you think about all the scenarios, it's like, well, if Biden wins Florida, it's basically over unless,
yes,
but there are some scenarios like that where there are some states that you can watch on election day, especially knowing that more Republicans are going to vote in person than Democrats did.
Yes.
So if Biden has a lead on Tuesday, any sort of significant lead, it's
over.
highly likely that he will win, because most of the mail-in ballots that get counted after are more likely to be Democratic votes.
Consolation prize. Although I do think Trump is winning, I think Democrats are taking the entire Congress.
Yeah. There's some race. Jamie Harrison is that
Lindsey Graham?
Lindsey Graham. Yeah. He's killing him.
Yeah. I think the Democrats are going to take both the House and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a saving grace for Trump remaining president and the entire Congress is blue, nothing's getting done. Nothing that he wants to get done is getting done.
Right. But then no progress can really be made either.
But at least no more detriments will occur.
Well, Obama had a Republican Congress. It's going to be the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Or Trump will have to be forced to work with them and meet in the middle. So we'll see. I don't think we're going to find out Tuesday night.
No, definitely not.
I think we'll find out.
I think towards the end of the week
later.
I think Friday or later.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weekend.
And buckle up.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough week.
But look, let me, if you're liberal or you're conservative or whatever, I've done a lot of thinking this week in particular, because I voted on Thursday, and I miss the days where people's political party didn't define them. I miss that a lot. I miss not looking, and I'm guilty of it. I miss not looking at someone that flies Trump flags in their yard and saying, never fucking talking to that person, never breaking bread with that person. I should. I should be willing to have conversations or to look past that and talk about other things that we might find common ground on, like sports or like music or something. The internet, I thoroughly believe that we are part of the guinea pig period for how the internet should and should not operate. Mm-hmm. And generations from now are going to look back at us with the advent of social media and this and say, what the fuck were they doing?
Yeah.
I think that we are part of the experimental period. And that's what we're going to be known for. And that's an unfortunate consequence. Like when the cars were first introduced, unfortunate consequences that they were machines, they were faulty, people died. Airplanes, people died. It's just, I'm not saying the internet is killing people, although it is. I'm saying there's going to be bumps in the road with new shit, and we're experiencing it. And we're part of the let's get it right demographic group of people in the world that unfortunately we're going through this. So my hope is that with the speed of progress, with the speed at which people are trying to organize things, and even though this pushback on both sides to try to get it to their way, my hope is in 20 years from now, which is again is a blip on the radar in human history, this will be sorted out and we can get back to that period. I hope it's sooner, but it's probably going to take a while where we can get back to that period where your political leanings don't necessarily define you as a person, and we can just break bread as people and just talk. And that's what I hope is accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that before, and I miss that too. And I think the only caveat for me is that there is a distinction between disagreeing about your politics and whether you're conservative or liberal in terms of how you view how the government, the government's role, and if it should be something should be run by the states or regulated at a federal level. I am all for talking about those things and having those political discussions and political differences. And that should not define or prevent friendships, relationships, anything like that. I miss those days too, but I am starting to accept the fact that it's okay to draw a line when it turns out that it's more than that. When it turns out that it's morals and if you disagree that someone deserves a basic human right, or you are just, and I'm not speaking about anybody in particular right now, I'm speaking very generally, but if it turns out that you are just flat out like being racist and you are not even willing to try to understand why your behavior or rhetoric is problematic and you don't see an issue, it's one thing if you just don't understand, and it's another thing if you're being willfully ignorant. So for me, I'm not saying I'm going to shut it down. If I know your political leaning is different than mine, I do know people and have friends who are Trump supporters. It's not an automatic line in the sand, but if we do have a conversation and it turns out that it's more than political differences, then yeah, we're probably going to have an issue.
That being said, go vote if you haven't already. And everything's going to be okay. I can only say that. I remember on the other podcast I was doing, the very first podcast I did when Trump won, I introduced the show with "Don't worry, be happy." I think no matter what, after you vote, before you vote, to encourage you to vote, to get you hyped, listen to that. Or if you're watching the results and stuff, just listen to that. At the end of the day, it might be out of touch for me to say this. I feel that everything's going to be okay. I hope everything's okay. So we'll see. But that's all I have. I don't know if you have any closing statements.
No, I don't think so. I'm in kind of disbelief that the next time we record will be after the election.
We hope.
Well, it'll
Maybe
be
not.
after the election. We might not know the results yet, but the election will have passed.
That being said, if you've enjoyed this conversation, you want to add your input to it, we would appreciate hearing from you no matter which side of the aisle you are on. Moreover, if you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe to the show. Next week, I promise we'll probably touch on the results if they're given, but we're not going to have a political conversation probably. Don't necessarily know what we're talking about next week, but it won't be political in nature. So that being said, if you like what you've heard, please subscribe to the show. Please take the time to give us 5 stars and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to hit us up on the socials, you can.
We're on Facebook at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping, on Instagram at whileshe'snapping, or on Twitter at she'snappingpod, or you can send us an email at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
Hit us up, let us know what you think, who's winning this election, and go vote. Do your part.
And if you can volunteer at a voting location to help people who are waiting in line in the cold or whatever. You can bring them snacks, water, those sorts of things. Those volunteer opportunities are still available. So look for those and do it if you can.
Take care.
Bye.